When Jack managed to disguise himself and enter their midst, and after he suffered to gain their trust, and prove to them that he is one of their most important men, something happened that no one expected. Jack was surprised by his daughter Emma pointing at him and saying, "My father is already here. This is my father." So what happened after that? This is what we will know in our story. If you like our story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell button.
My name is Jacob Jack Miller. I'm 38 years old and have been an FBI agent for the past 12 years. I stand at just over 6 feet tall, with an athletic build, short brown hair, and gray eyes that have seen more than they ever should have. Some of my colleagues joke that I look like one of those movie heroes, but the life I lead is far from glamorous. I don't get a script, and there are no second takes, only split-second decisions that can mean the difference between life and death. My job? A mix of surveillance, deep investigations, and undercover operations. Most of the cases I work on leave scars, ones that aren't visible, but they never fade. I don't talk about what I do, not really, but I believe in one thing. There is darkness in this world, and it is my job to chase it down before it consumes the innocent. It started when I was assigned to infiltrate one of the most dangerous criminal syndicates in the country, an organization known as Black Spider. A network of drug traffickers, assassins, and corrupt officials pulling strings behind the scenes and ruling the streets with an invisible grip. My case began when one of our undercover agents, who had managed to work his way inside, suddenly went dark. No calls, no messages. The only thing we found was a single coded note sent through his secure channel. "There's a traitor inside." When I was given the mission, my superior Special Agent Michael Carson made one thing clear. These people don't trust anyone. They have ways of sniffing out infiltrators. If they find out who you are, Jack, they won't let you walk away alive. I knew the risks. I took the job anyway. My identity was erased, replaced with a new one. I became Ethan Riley, a former convict, recently released from prison. No family, no friends, just a history of violent crimes and illegal dealings. If I was going to survive, I had to become the role. The first step was getting their attention. I found an opening through an underground fight ring run by one of their men, a place where broken men turned their pain into entertainment. I knew how to throw a punch, but more importantly, I knew how to take one. That night, I stepped into the ring and made sure they noticed me. By the time the fight was over, I was bleeding, bruised, and victorious. That was enough to catch the eye of Victor Lazaro, one of Black Spider's higher-ups. Lazaro was a cold man, the kind whose icy blue eyes could strip you down to your bones. He had an air of control about him, the type of presence that made others fall in line without question. "I like the way you fight, Riley," he had said, his voice calm but laced with something unreadable. "Maybe there's a place for you with us." And just like that, I was in. Gaining their trust took time. I worked my way up slowly, moving drugs, running money drops, attending meetings in dimly lit warehouses where lives were gambled away over drinks and hushed conversations. But the deeper I got, the more I realized that this was bigger than a drug ring. Black Spider wasn't just another crime syndicate. It was a web, tangled with names of politicians, corporate leaders, even people within my own agency. But the most dangerous mystery of all was the man at the top. No one knew his real identity. They only called him Mr. X, a name whispered in shadows, even by his own men. He was more myth than man, but his reach was real and absolute. Then came the night everything changed. I was in one of their storage facilities, gathering intel on a shipment worth millions, when I sensed someone watching me. I turned sharply, ready to draw my weapon, but the figure before me wasn't one of Lazaro's men. It was a woman. She had dark hair, piercing green eyes, and a confidence that told me she wasn't just some bystander. "You're not one of them," she said, her voice low, deliberate. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, studying the way she carried herself, calm, but ready to run. "And neither are you," I finally replied. Her name was Eliza Morgan, and she was after something inside Black Spider. But she wasn't law enforcement. At least, not officially. I didn't know if she was a rogue agent, a revenge seeker, or something else entirely. But what I did know was that we were both playing a dangerous game, and neither of us could afford to lose. Days passed, and the tension inside the organization grew thick enough to choke on. Something was off. Information was leaking. Eyes lingered too long in meetings. Then, during a closed-door discussion with Lazaro, his phone rang. He answered with a calm nod, listening intently before his gaze flicked to me. "There's a traitor among us," he said, his voice even, but I could feel the weight of suspicion settling over the room. I forced my breathing to remain steady, even as my pulse thundered in my ears. Had they discovered me? Or was someone else in their ranks working an angle of their own? That night, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Get out, now before it's too late." I stared at the screen, my mind racing. Who sent this? Eliza, the missing agent? Or was this a trap? One thing was certain. I was in deeper than I had planned, and I wasn't sure if I would make it out alive. As I looked at my reflection in the cracked, dust-covered mirror across the room, I saw a man who was no longer sure who he could trust. And worse, I wasn't sure if I could still trust myself. There was no room for hesitation. The moment Lazaro announced that there was a traitor among us, I knew any sign of doubt or nervousness on my part could be a death sentence. I had spent too much time building my cover, too much effort gaining their trust, to let it all collapse now. If I wanted to survive, I had to act fast, take control of the moment, and give them someone else to suspect. I let the silence stretch just long enough to feel heavy, then turned my gaze toward the man sitting to my left, Reynaldo Marcos. He was always on edge, the kind of guy who twitched at shadows and asked too many questions. That type never lasted long in an organization like this. If there was anyone they might already be doubting, it was him. I leaned back slightly, keeping my expression unreadable, and spoke with quiet confidence. "I've noticed Marcos has been acting strange lately." The reaction was immediate. Heads turned toward him. His breath hitched. I could see the flicker of panic in his eyes, the way his fingers curled into fists as he struggled to maintain his composure. He started stammering something, denials, explanations, but it didn't matter. The seed of doubt had already been planted. Lazaro's icy blue eyes locked onto Marcos, assessing him, weighing the possibility. He didn't speak right away, but I could tell from his expression that my words had taken root. I had successfully redirected their suspicions, at least for now. That night, I had won. But surviving one battle didn't mean I had won the war. Over the next few days, my position within the organization solidified. The deeper I went, the more powerful the people I met. Names I had only seen in classified files became real, breathing figures standing before me, shaking my hand, testing my loyalty. One of them was Sergio Valdez, a financial mastermind who laundered millions without leaving a trace. Then there was Carter Hughes, a cybersecurity expert with access to systems even the FBI struggled to penetrate. If I played my cards right, these men could be my way to uncovering the truth about Mr. X. But fate had other plans. It happened on a night that should have been routine. I was at an upscale restaurant, a known meeting spot for the higher-ups in Black Spider. The air smelled of expensive whiskey and the kind of power that made men feel untouchable. I had been nursing a drink, listening, watching, always watching. And then I saw him. At a table near the window, comfortably seated across from one of the network's key figures, was Ryan Coleman. The sight of him hit me like a punch to the gut. Ryan Coleman wasn't just any man. He was an FBI agent, a man I had worked alongside, a man I had trusted. And now he was here, drinking, talking, blending in with the very people we were supposed to be hunting. But the shock didn't end there. Seated beside him, engaged in quiet conversation as if she belonged in this world, was a woman I never expected to see in a place like this. My friend's wife. I felt my pulse thunder in my ears, my mind racing to make sense of what I was seeing. Was she involved? Was she a victim? And what the hell was Ryan doing here? 1,000 possibilities surged through my head, none of them good. I had spent months convincing these people that I was one of them. Months making sure no one from my past ever crossed into this world. And yet, here they were. In that moment, as I sat frozen in place, a chilling realization settled over me. This wasn't just a mission anymore. This was personal. And I had no idea who I could trust. There was no turning back now. Since that night at the restaurant, Ryan Coleman's face had been burned into my mind. A man I had worked with for years, a man I had trusted with my life, was sitting comfortably among the very criminals we had sworn to take down. This wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't a misunderstanding. I needed answers. For days I watched from the shadows. I followed his movements, tracked his routines, studied his habits like a predator stalking its prey. I never got too close, never did anything that could tip him off. I was just another unseen figure in the darkness, piecing together the truth, one clue at a time. But Coleman wasn't the only one I was watching. There was also her, his wife. I had met her only a handful of times before, always in passing, always at a distance. She had seemed like any other woman, elegant, soft-spoken, far removed from the kind of world her husband and I lived in. But that was a lie. She wasn't just Coleman's wife. She wasn't just an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. She was something far more dangerous. It started with a name. The name she had given Coleman, the one everyone knew her by, wasn't her real name. I dug deeper. I called in favors, sifted through old intelligence files, followed trails that had been buried for years. And then I found it. A single, chilling piece of information that changed everything. She was the sister of Mr. X. The moment I saw it, the air seemed to vanish from the room. I read it again and again, trying to convince myself that I had made a mistake. But there it was, in black and white, undeniable. How long had Coleman known? Did he find out before or after he married her? Did he walk into this willingly, or had she played him from the very beginning? Then came the most disturbing realization of all. Coleman wasn't working with them out of greed. He wasn't some dirty agent who had turned on his own for power or money. He had been trapped, slowly, carefully, manipulated step by step until there was no way out. And the reason he stayed? Love. He loved her too much to see the truth. Or maybe he saw it and didn't care. Maybe, by the time he realized who she really was, it was already too late. Maybe he had convinced himself he could protect her, keep her safe from the world her brother ruled with an iron fist. But if she was his sister, then what did that mean for me? Had Mr. X known about my infiltration all along? Had I walked into a trap, thinking I was the hunter, when I had been the prey the entire time? One thing was clear. This wasn't just about an undercover operation anymore. This was about family. And in this world, family meant power. And power was deadly. The nights in this world were endless. Every time I closed my eyes for even a second, ghosts haunted me. Faces of the people I had deceived. Secrets piling up like chains tightening around my throat. But the worst ghosts weren't those I had left behind in this life. They were the ones I had tried to protect. My family. They thought I was someone else now. 2 years ago, I told them I had left the FBI. I made them believe that I had walked away from a life of chases, gunfire, and enemies lurking around every corner. I convinced them I had chosen something safer, something quieter. I told them I worked in tourism, a job that explained why I was always traveling, why I was always in different cities, different countries, never staying in one place too long. It was the perfect lie. I had no choice. My wife feared that one day I wouldn't come back, that I'd walk out the door one morning and become nothing more than a memory. But the one thing that haunted me the most, Emma, my daughter, 9 years old, a piece of innocence in a world ruled by monsters. I never wanted her to know who I really was. I never wanted her to wake up one day and realize that there were people in this world who wanted me dead. I lived for the moment this mission would end, for the moment I could walk through my front door, see her running toward me, laughing, demanding I tell her a bedtime story. A story without killers, without secrets, without the shadows I lived in. But deep down, I knew the truth. There was a chance I would never come back. And still, I was willing to do anything to make sure Emma never found out the truth. But thinking about the past could get you killed. Because danger never sleeps. The sensation was like a cold jolt of electricity down my spine. My breathing slowed, my senses sharpened. I felt it before I saw it. A shift in the air, the kind of disturbance that shouldn't have been there. I wasn't alone. I didn't turn. I didn't make any sudden movements. Rule number 1, never let them know you know, but I saw it. A faint reflection in the window's glass, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. Someone was watching me. How long had they been there? Had they been tracking me all this time? Had I been in their sights for days without realizing it? Who were they? A soldier from Black Spider? One of Mr. X's men? Or had I just woken up to the terrifying truth that there was another player in the game? My heartbeat didn't quicken. It stayed steady, cold, controlled, because I knew one thing for sure. If they were watching me, there were only 2 possibilities. Either they suspected me, or they already knew who I really was. And in both cases, time was running out. The moments were accelerating rapidly, and I felt the ground beneath me was about to crumble. Everything was unfolding in an unexpected way, and my mind couldn't stop racing about what might happen next. I was sure I was being watched by someone, but I never expected that this person was more than just a casual observer. What I discovered was a shock. He wasn't just anyone. He was an undercover agent. Behind the mask of an ordinary man, he carried an unknown identity, an agent sent by Mr. X to assess me. He had been monitoring me for some time, tracking my every move. But there was something strange in his behavior. He wasn't just following orders. He was observing me with a sharpness that suggested he saw something in me that others didn't. It seemed that I had affected him in some way. He wasn't just involved in the Black Spider network. He was part of something bigger. He had begun to trust me, and somehow he saw something different in me than he had seen in the others he had worked with before. He believed I wasn't like them, that I had the ability to handle more complex tasks. His eyes were filled with questions and challenges, as though there was a story he hadn't yet shared with me. And the moment we began our conversation, it felt like we were in a race against time. "Jack," he said in a calm voice but full of confidence, "you're not like them, are you?" I knew he was referring to the fact that we weren't playing the same dirty games, but the question was, did that mean he trusted me enough to offer me a new mission? "I think I'm on my way to becoming more of a partner," I added, reading his subtle cues, trying to stay calm amidst this unexpected turn of events. "We have a new mission, Jack, and it's bigger than you thought," he said. That was the moment when I started seeing the bigger picture. The plans Mr. X was orchestrating were more than just about controlling crime. It was about something much larger, far more intricate and dangerous. But while I was in the middle of this crucial meeting that would change everything, something else was brewing. Emma. I never thought she would show up at this exact moment, during this very conversation. But fate had other plans. While we were discussing the details of the upcoming mission, Emma entered. Her eyes scanned the room hesitantly, a look of confusion and surprise on her face. She stopped at a certain point, as if something strange had clicked in her mind. She looked around at the people in the room and asked in an unstable voice, "Can I know where my father is?" One of them quickly responded, "There is no one here with the description you mentioned. We don't know anyone by that name." But despite the answer, Emma's heart was racing, as if she felt something different. She knew her father was somewhere close, and in the next moment, she found him. She pointed directly at him and said quietly but firmly, "But my father is here. This is my father." The moment was charged with tension. Emma's words, "But my father is here. This is my father," struck like lightning, freezing everyone in their tracks. Silence enveloped the room, and the eyes of everyone around me flicked between disbelief and confusion. No one expected Emma to reveal this at such a crucial moment. The room was stunned. The undercover agent froze, his gaze shifting between Emma and me, then around the room, as if caught between exposure and the chaos that would unfold after this moment. But in that instant, a plan sparked in my mind. A trick, one I had taught Emma long ago. A special signal we used when we wanted to prank her mother. We had always used this gesture to confuse others, to mislead them into thinking something completely different. I knew this was my chance. I acted quickly. I made a subtle gesture, a move with my hand, the same movement I had shown her when we used to prank her mom. It was a moment of deception, a move that could keep my true identity hidden. I said in a calm voice, "I'm not your father. I'm just a man you think is your father." The man you consider your father, Dahan, was actually a criminal and a colleague of mine. He passed away in prison. We're just playing a small joke on our friends. He's someone you used to feel comfortable around, but you never knew the truth. It was a clever lie. The response threw everyone off, making them think they had misjudged the situation. The undercover agent seemed to relax, his posture loosening as if the pressure had lifted. After a few moments of confusion, the tension in the room began to dissipate, and the others started to accept the explanation. No one dared to challenge the story I spun. There was no time for questioning, and the situation needed to be handled carefully. And just like that, I had won this round. As the room began to calm, I felt a sense of satisfaction in my ability to manipulate the situation. I was Jack. I had managed to lead them all into a web of doubt, keeping the truth hidden just long enough. With the atmosphere shifting back to something resembling normalcy, I began to focus on my next steps. By nightfall, I had gathered enough evidence to bring them all down, but more importantly, I had bought myself the precious time I needed. Emma was talking about a prank on her mother, while I, on the other hand, had successfully maneuvered through this tense moment, securing my position. When I finally returned home, after everything I had been through, I found solace in the simple, familiar moments. The light from the porch lanterns bathed the yard as I sat with Emma, laughing at the strange situations we had found ourselves in. In that moment, I felt like I had finally returned to something safe. But I knew the adventure wasn't over yet. Now, at least, I could be with my family, where safety and stability could be a part of our lives once more, even if only for a brief moment. My story, or rather, the story I've never told anyone before.